What we're about to watch right now is a great overview by Dr. Jose Pimienta on the negative psychological consequences of continuing to identify with this color. Now, on this channel, we identify ourselves as Earpois, right? That's our ethnicity. American is our nationality for those who are from America. And so it could be said that we're Earpois Americans, right? And so we're not African, European, or Asian culturally centered, but rather we center ourselves around whatever the best cultural practice is that takes us in the direction that we want to go, which includes modifying practices from a variety of cultures, right? Asian, European, African, it doesn't matter, right? And creating our own aspects of culture to fill in or fix problems that other cultural practices may not be fitting to solve. But Dr. Pimienta, on the other hand, he comes from a little bit of a different angle. He identifies with the Moorish nationality, and I believe he's more African culturally centered, right? And so there's differences there, but although there are differences, it still doesn't take away from the fact that he makes a lot of great points in this video about what's implied by keeping the black identity and the negative psychological effects that go into keeping that identity. And so I think it's important to share his view on this topic. So here we go.
If we want to speak about, the collective power of black people, well, what are you talking about? Do you mean the collective power of African people? You mean Pan-Africanism or then say African. I don't understand why people are so wedded to the term black. And the justification for it is, well, it's because the European made it negative. It's the Europeans' word. It was negative before it was applied to African people. It's like they're getting it backwards. It isn't that Europeans said we're going to make this word black negative in order to accommodate our desire to devalue African people or dark complexioned Asian people or dark complexioned Native Americans. That's not how it worked. The word black, right, absence of light, if you will, was supposed to be understood by any English speaker as largely negative before it was applied to people of African or Asian ancestry. Dr. Akbar, the prominent African-American psychologist, often talks about one of our issues is that we have become, we meaning people of the African world, whether it's the continent or more especially within the diaspora, so-called black folks, are very reactive rather than proactive, which means that if this individual is calling himself white, we're going to react and call ourselves black because we're the opposite. Not really understanding that we're not exactly taking a step in the right direction because now, as I like to say, given all the linguistic and cultural baggage of black, you are trying to push an elephant uphill on roller skates. You're trying to turn a negative into a positive when there's a clean, pure stream nearby to draw from.
And I've said this before, black people have decided to keep themselves locked into a perpetual duel with white people by continuing to identify as black. And so this is equivalent to the good and evil paradigm, right? And when you look at what is symbolically represented by the words black and white, it's not hard to pinpoint which of these names is representative of the evil side and which one is representative of the good side, right? It's just a matter of being honest with oneself and then understanding that this is a battle that the black side can never win, right? Simply because this is the way that the game was rigged. It's rigged for you to lose when you keep playing that game and keeping on the black identity. What you just do is keep further digging yourself deeper and deeper down into the pit. Let's get some more.
If you're referring to complexion, in fact, there's a famous scene in the movie Cry Freedom about the life of Steve Biko. The presumption is that this event actually occurred if it didn't, it still made sense in terms of the screenwriters and Richard Attenborough putting it into the film. And that is, Steve Biko was in court. He's charged with basically, being seen as a threat to the apartheid system, and he was banned. So he's in court talking to the European judge, the Boer British judge, and the judge says to him,
"Why call yourselves black? I mean, you people are more brown than black."
And Biko says,
"Why do you call yourselves white? You people are more pink than white."
And the judge goes,
"Precisely."
but there's no deeper unpacking of what just occurred. And it raises an important question about systems of oppression. Why did Europeans decide to designate themselves as white? More specifically, English-speaking Europeans, because the term white is an English term. When you know why they chose the term, then you know what they sought to gain by it. When you also see that they leveled the term black against us, Asiatics, Africans, Asians, then you know what they sought to gain by imposing that on us. But why the need to fixate on black? There's the work of a Harvard psychologist who I believe is of East Indian ancestry. Her name is Dr. Banerjee. And her work on looking at the implicit association test, which is used by psychologists to look at implied bias or biases that exist. She recognizes what are often called mind bug, or in fact, she coined the term mind bugs, which are culturally imposed perceptions of reality. And the dominant perception of reality for those of us who speak the English language is when you say black or use black, its dominant use is negative. Black magic, black night, black death.
Black ball, blacklisted, black cat, black market, which are all negative things. And then you walk around and you call yourself a black. Think about it. All you have to do is think about it. Think about the concepts that you're linking together with your identity, right? What we're doing now is digging beneath the surface. And we want to find out the psychological effect that it has on a person when they call themselves these things.
Right? And to try to overcome that is very difficult. Now, this is a Harvard faculty member, psychologist, prominent psychologist who's pointing this out. And she calls them the mind bugs. Now, part of what people can do, you could say, well, you need to get people to stop thinking of black as something negative. Okay, that's all right. But in the context of, do you want to fight that battle? Or more importantly, should you be fighting that battle? Because you're still reducing yourself again to your pigment.
And an incorrect pigment at that, right? What you're doing is distorting your own reality.
And you're not looking at yourself in the context of a larger history. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to speak of we as highly melanated people, or we as NUC, or we as I would say, people of predominant African ancestry, that makes more sense to me. I'm just saying. So when I looked at what Drew Ali was trying to convey, and did convey, obviously, to those who heard what he was saying, back in the early teens and 1920s in particular, that you are not black, you are not Negro, you are not colored. Just on a psychological level, I can see the value. I haven't even gotten into what the value and importance of what he was saying by having folks reject calling themselves Negro, black, or colored, because that's a whole nother issue. I just got into the psychology of it, right? That's why people, confuse. I've often thought of this. You have a child reading about the Black Knight and the Black Death and the Black Plague, and then the child goes, oh, and I'm a black child.
Uh-oh, the seeds of self-hate are planted in the youth. And when they become adults, it becomes very difficult for them to find out why they see themselves the way that they see themselves, with the name black being one of the main contributors of how they see themselves. So yes, it's important what children call themselves, and it's also important the ideas that are associated with the name that they call themselves, right? These things matter.
So, like I said, Drew Ali, just in terms of saying you're not Negro, black, and colored, was getting people out from under that weight of the negativity associated with blackness. And for people who say, well, it's better, the same person would not allow you to call him a Negro. But with all due respect, Negro is the same thing as black. If I'm speaking Spanish, it's negro. I'm going to call you Negro, right? So it doesn't make any sense.
Now he's going to go into the Moorish identity right now. And like I said, this identity is not what we're promoting on this channel, but I still want to let him get off the information that he wants to get off, just in case someone is interested in that movement or they want to learn something else from that movement, right? Because I've learned a lot of good information from a couple notable Moors, right? And they've put a lot of work in to help people get away from that black identity. So let's continue going.
Make any sense. Yet, again, Moor is a reference to a people, to an empire that covered a geographical location. The Moorish Empire at one time was from the northwestern part of the Maghreb or North Africa, all the way down to the Senegal River and as far east as the border of Egypt. That's part of what, and I'm just talking about what we know as the recognized Moorish Empire in terms of international and diplomatic history and relations. So we can say that covers a wide swath of the African continent. That would include Africans of various hues, people who would be darker in complexion and others who'd be lighter in complexion. And the primary sources from Duarte, Portuguese travelers, and Azrara and English sources all affirm that the term Moor was used for people of African ancestry. Later, the term blackamoor is introduced, but it's part of the development of the kind of pigmentocracy direction that exists. Within the English language, just as in other languages, there are different ways to translate something more accurately. So, and one of the examples I've often used is the difference in Spanish if you're speaking of knowing someone versus knowing something. You don't use the same verb. Conocer and saber is not the same thing, right? One means to know a person, one means to know about something. By the same token, if you translate Moor to simply mean black, knowing that black in the English language is affiliated with so much negativity, long before it was ever referenced for people of African or I dare say Indian ancestry, because a lot of people seem to be under the impression that black was only used to refer to people of Africa, and that's not true. Black was, and in some cases, is still used to refer to people of Asia by Europeans. My first trip to England, and I was talking to people from Indonesia and Pakistan and Cambodia and different parts of Southeast Asia, and they were bringing to my attention how you can read articles in the paper, and this is in the early 90s, where they would talk about a black person doing something. Usually it might have been affiliated with some criminal act, unfortunately, which was part of their point at the time. But they were saying that the term was used to encompass them. And there was a debate between the younger generation of these people from Southeast Asia saying, well, we'll use the word black. I mean, people in the Americas have a black pride movement and you know, there was black consciousness in South Africa. And then there were those who were elders who were averse to it. They didn't like it because they said, you don't want to be encapsulated simply in a color, because now the emphasis is simply on your color and not on your culture.
Now we can see, according to the good doctor's account, that these people understood the importance of culture. And it seems like Westerners are some of the only people in the world who have a hard time understanding this concept of culture, right? And that culture has always been a better identifier of a group than a color or a physical feature, right? The colonists, they did a marvelous job with infecting people's minds with this color concept, right? And although people's own reality and their experience shows that they never have seriously bonded with anyone over the simple fact that they share a similar outward appearance, people still buy into that concept, right? But that's not how it works. And these people, they clearly understood that until they were affected and they were influenced by the Black Power and Black Pride movement over here in the West.
So they said, well, they saw the value of, meaning the young people saw the value of trying to use a new hip kind of term, if you will. But the elders said no, because what that's doing is reducing your value, because in the English language, Black is largely associated with a bunch of negativity. And just like Richard B. Moore said in his book from the 60s, the term or the word Negro, its origin and evil use, he made the same argument. Why you shouldn't use the term Negro? Well, guess what? Negro is Spanish for Black. So folks went from Negro in Espanol to Black in English, but it's still the same thing. And I literally mean thing. So defining yourself by an ethnicity or a nationality clearly would make more sense.
And I agree with this 100%, which is why we dropped the Black identity, which was given to people in the slave world, and we created our own ethnicity as Earpois, right? And we're people of the free world. And we also want to help others do the same thing who desire to move forward, right? Because you have to understand one thing, that this is not for everyone, right? Everyone's consciousness isn't ripe enough. And that's why some people, or not even some people, a lot of people have to be left behind, right? Until one day they're ready. Now, real quick, let's go into the comment section right now and let's see what some of the people are saying about this video. This person right here says, people who have been labeled as Black have to decide to stop defining themselves as such an oppressive term. That's right? I agree 100%. People have to make a decision to stop defining themselves as Black. But first, they have to have the desire to want to make that change, right? No desire, no decision, no detachment. That's how it works. Another person says this: my husband and I were literally talking about the word Black yesterday. Why was it applied to us, and why have we still chosen to accept? This person has developed to a stage where they can at least ask a very basic question about this Black identity, right? And from the questions is where you go on the quest to find the answer. If you don't ask the question, you're not going on the quest, right? Now let's look at this last comment here. It says, nice argument. However, I'm still Black. Now, this is why I say that there has to be a great separation in this final phase of freedom, because there's a lot of people who can care less about progress, right? This person right here clearly understands that it's a negative word, that it was given to people by the Europeans. And guess what? This person could care less, right? This person didn't even give a counter argument in their reply. Only in their reply, they just simply said that they're going to stay as a Black person, right? This is why I say that you have two choices. You're either going to stay in the pit with people like this, or you're going to climb out and you're going to keep it moving, and you're going to do the best possible thing for yourself and for the generations to come, right? 100 all the way up to 500 years and beyond from now, right? So think about that as we continue and get back into the video.
And when the late, great political scientist Ali Mazrui, who was known for doing a series back in the 80s on Africa, he was Kenyan born. He actually said, Black people are the only group in the United States that is designated racially as opposed to geographically, right? Or nationally. And this is part of the problem, right? You have, and that's why I've said to people all the time, why don't we speak of yellow Americans, right? If we're going to use the color nomenclature, use it across the board. just use it all the time. But someone will say, well, I'm Irish, I'm German, I'm black, and they're running through their lineage, and I'm going, all right, Germans come from Germany, the Irish come from Ireland. Black, what is that? At least, because we don't know where we're from. You can at least say Africa. At least say Africa, right? At least say African. I know I have some African ancestors. And now in this day and age, you can even do an Ancestry.com test and they can tell you, right, what part of Africa, what ethnic group or nation or so-called tribe one is from, right? So the value of not identifying with black is it compels you to be more specific in identifying culture, knowing your geographic origin, knowing your history. Again, it's not that black is negative because it's associated with people of African ancestry. I keep telling people black was negative before it was applied. That's why those who wanted to oppress us used it, right? And even in Spanish, the term negro, they called Africans who they had enslaved or who were oppressed by them or suppressed, or all three of the above, they called them negros, right? They were saying, and at one time they also said piezas, which means pieces, like things. But the idea is, again, to say, you don't have personhood. I've made you into a thing. Now, if someone says, yeah, but what about the word white? White is not a nation either. No, but white in the English language was understood to be affirming of everything favorable, right? So when people said white, that's why, as you know, in the Moorish tradition, when the prophet said white means purity, purity means God, and God means the ruler of the land. So when you see white in that context, and even in the medieval period when the Templars, because there is a Masonic element to part of this too, referred to living a good life as a pure and white life, which meant they were supposed to be honorable men, which meant they were supposed to respect life and live as Christ had instructed as far as they understood it. But that was the phrase, a pure and white life. So they're using a term for themselves that's meant to affirm and empower. Because like I said before, in referencing, Biko versus the judge, he said, you're more pink than white. So why do you call yourselves white? Well, because white is a lot more culturally affirming of our power, our divinity, our superiority than calling ourselves pink, right? And if we were to actually say to someone, show me a black person, show me some. So because I've heard people say, I've seen people who are jet black. Yeah, I've seen people who are also very dark in hue as well. People say almost like a bluish or purplish tint. But the vast majority of people who you're calling black don't look like that. Just like the vast majority of people who you're calling white don't look like this paper. Right? So it's not about complexion. That's what's so disturbing. It's not about complexion. There's an area of science known as neurolinguistics. And in neurolinguistics addresses this issue of how language affects the mind or how we think. And this relates again to the research I was discussing earlier with Dr. Benashi, that words have power, basically, and how we think is defined by our conception of certain words. That's why I said, trying to make the word idiot favorable doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you can just call somebody by the existing words in that language or in another language, which means something good, genius. For me, again, influenced by Moorish science and influenced by what Prophet Noble Drew Ali was conveying, I said, that makes so much sense. Ask yourself why people who are Asian don't identify as yellow. Why are you so fixated on calling yourself by a color? And then if you tell me it's not a color, it's a political concept, political construct. Okay, so you gave me a political construct, but now I'm going to ask you, who are you? Where are you from? In other words, because I've heard people make the argument, it's a political construct. It means a reference to those of us who are oppressed under the weight of global white supremacy. Okay, but now I'm going to ask you the same question. Who are you? Where do your people come from? What contributions have you made to the forward flow of civilization? Because I get the importance of recognizing there's a system of oppression. I get that. But do you want to remain in the mindset always of being victimized?
A whole bunch of them secretly do. But one thing they'll never do is they'll never say it out loud. But their actions will always speak louder than their words. So in that case, it's always easy to discover the ones who want to remain as a comfortable victim.
So that you never move into the realm of, all right, but I have value, and here's why I have value. Because people say, well, I know we're descendants of kings and queens, and I'll say the same thing. Name some. Martin Luther King. Since I'm trying to be funny, and I'm saying, see, you naming kings and queens, Queen Latifah. I mean, that's fine that we know these individuals who have obviously made contributions in their own right. But you know what I'm saying. You're telling me you're proud to be, quote unquote, black. I want to know what you're proud of. You're telling me you're comfortable with being black. I want to know what you're comfortable with. Tell me at length what your value is based upon your blackness. And if you start going to a discussion of legacies in African history, I'm going to return you back to the same point. So what you're saying is you're proud to be African. So say it. Why do you keep fixating on the color or the political construct? This idea of seeing the importance of a name, right? Names, words have power, the ancient Kemetic principle of nomo, the power of the spoken word. These are things that I also was exposed to in Africa-centered circles, which is why it was so odd for me that I had people trying to affirm blackness or black. To me, like I said, there's something else going on. So I say again, other folks are not calling themselves yellow Americans. There's no yellow power. There's no yellow consciousness. And those groups of people who are Asian, of different nationalities, they have tended to do pretty well, even in the face of what we know as so-called global white supremacy, right? And yes, I know that they know more about themselves, their culture's more intact. I agree. That's exactly why I'm telling you, figure out what your culture is so you can spread it and make it more influential within your community. Negroholism or Negroholic. Basically, to me, when I thought of that, that's in reference to those of us who still think that we are Negroes or black. We're obsessed with that. Even though if we really analyze it, we know it's destructive, just like alcoholism. An alcoholic essentially doesn't really know that she or he is destroying themselves by drinking an excess of alcohol. Or an alcoholic is one who knows that it's destroying them, but doesn't really care. Perhaps because they feel guilt or shame. It's a form of self-medication. Many counselors, psychologists will tell you. And so the Negroholic, to me, was someone who's still obsessing over some guilt or shame about being a Negro or black. And they engage in self-destructive activities. Killing other brothers or sisters for a pair of sneakers or for an insult, a verbal insult. Bringing poison into the community because they're saying, I got to get mine and you got to get yours, and no sense of the danger or destruction that you're bringing about to that community. Going back to one of the Africa-centered psychologists, Dr. Naeem Akbar, when he talks about alien self disorder and anti-self disorder, and he emphasizes that that anti-self is the destruction of oneself or one's community in the ways I just expressed. So my reference to this, like I said, this Negroholism, or like I used to say when I was teaching at WVU, that we have many Negroholics and we need to go into a recovery system. And the recovery system is to learn to love ourselves, learn to love instead of hate, and to learn to love our true selves, and then learn about the system of oppression that functions around us. And the Negroholic is one who either doesn't see it yet and continues to engage in pathological or self-destructive behavior, or does see it, but still feels they're unworthy. There's the tragedy again. They're unworthy of doing anything to change it, just because it's too hard or they don't value themselves.
So I'm going to end the video right here. The full video will be posted in the description below. And what I want to do is give a special thanks to Dr. Jose Pimienta Bay for making this video and for bringing out the information. And what I believe is that this will help someone out there who is questioning and is on the quest to climb out of the pit and get themselves into the free world where life is much better and it makes more sense. And so I want to thank you for watching all the way into the end. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.